Well, I'll get started now. All right, hi everybody. My name is Seth Larsen. I've been a blacksmith for a little over 8 years now. I'm self-taught. I mostly learned through YouTube videos, and then I got a few books eventually. And the only instructor I've ever had was a couple years ago, a man in Sandpoint named Fiddle in Red. He taught me a few specialized skills, like he taught me to be better at forge welding and making axes. But beyond that, it's all self-taught stuff and just equipment I picked up on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace. Most of my hammers come from antique stores. I'll pick up old hammer heads. I can usually get hammer heads for like $1 or so, and then I put handles on them. And then once you have hammers, you can make things like your own tools, your own tongs. Blacksmithing is a cornerstone skill. It's essential for societies, or at least it has been throughout history up until the last 150 years or so. And that's because every single tool that any trade used stuff that the blacksmith made. Every carpenter used saws, axes, chisels, calipers, nails, hammers from the blacksmith. Stonemasons, all their tools, their chisels and stuff came from the blacksmith. So it's essential for every other craft. So it's a cornerstone skill for that reason, because it builds societies and allows self-sufficiency. Of course, if you want to go to the very root of things, smelting your own iron is how you get truly self-sufficient. I haven't done that yet, but so what I'm first going to do is, by the way, I have a bunch of display items here. People are welcome to come take a look at them if you want. All things that I've forged, including like kitchenwares. I just made this pan recently, and this works just like a cast iron pan. It's seasoned the same way, and I cook in it now. Anyway, so I'm going to start by this hammer here. I always keep on a hook, but when I moved my forge, I misplaced the hook that used to be right here that I'd hang it from. So,
better make one.
Yeah, get one made. This is 1/4-inch round stock. I get most of my steel as scrap, like from recycle bins and stuff like that, junkyards. So it's nice getting as much of my stuff as I can for free. Yeah. So coal, this is coal. It's a mineral from the earth. It's made of dinosaurs and ancient trees. It's fossil fuel. It burns really hot, and it's straight out of the ground. No purification is done. It's dug up, and it burns really well as long as it has airflow. So that's why I have a blower here. The blower gets it hot enough that it can actually get steel to temperatures where steel becomes very malleable. I'm not melting steel, I'm just heating it up so it becomes soft. So the two main components of a forge are the blower and the fire pot. Forges can be made all sorts of different ways. Nephi was commanded to build a ship. His first question was, okay, where do I get ore to make the tools to build the ship? And that sort of resourcefulness might be something that needs to come back. Oops, let me switch hammers actually. Right now I'm drawing this end to a square point. I'm giving the iron little 90-degree turns. That way I can hit each face, and it makes a skinny pyramid shape. You can all see that. So that's a nice point now. And to make this hook, it's just going to be horseshoe shape, kind of like this, with a point on either end. So now I have that little spike on one end made, I'm going to make a mark using the edge of my anvil. There we go, nice little mark there. And I'll heat it up. Actually, you know what? I might just cut it as is. This is not an axe, and this is not Thor's new hammer in one of the Avengers movies. This is a cutoff tool. It's mostly used to cut hot steel, but I also use it on cold steel.
You need to hold the rod?
Nah. I'm just trying to be gentle about it so it doesn't go shooting off in that direction. If I can cut most of the way through it, then I can use that to snap it. Just like that. Nobody touch that. That's very hot. I just need to grab some tongs.
Tell us about an anvil.
Good question. An anvil is just a chunk of metal that's not going to move. The one thing that makes an anvil really good is when it has a hard steel face. Certain tools like hammers, axes, and knives, they're made of hardened steel, high carbon steel. The more carbon is in your steel, the harder you can make it. And that allows for it to hold a sharper edge or to not dent when you whack stuff with it. So an anvil is just a normal steel body with a high carbon steel head, and that way it makes a hammer bounce, just like that. I keep... That's right. Believe it or not, anvils do have a secondary use besides dropping them on roadrunners. Now, an anvil as is rings very much. This is a magnet, but just by sticking that on the skinny end, it dulls the ring quite a bit. So that's for noise control for the neighborhood that I'm in. I have not, because this anvil costs... Yeah, this is like $1,000 anvil.
What they do is they pour out the bottom and they put it on top of another one upside down. They put gunpowder in it. And you light the gunpowder and you launch it. Go watch YouTube, shooting an anvil.
Launches the anvil into the air?
And it'll bury it like 3 feet.
Oh my gosh.
You just make sure it doesn't fall on you.
Yeah, no kidding. Oops.
I guess it was a sport back in the day.
I have lots of different shapes of tongs for different kinds of steel, different shapes of steel. These are my general purpose tongs. They can hold stuff like small round stock, small flat stock, and flat stock means like flat bars or round bars. So that's pretty much the shape. In fact, I can probably just continue the bend right here. I'm gonna heat it up to make it a little more even. Got a little crooked there. What's that? Yes, if I work the steel too much before or while it's not hot enough, then it starts fatiguing because of stress. You start messing up the internal structure of the steel. So it'll become brittle and it'll snap easily if that's the case. So I always forge it hot, especially when you're working high carbon steel. Like if I'm making a knife blade, I have to work the steel really hot. Anytime it starts to lose its glow, then I need to put it back in the fire. If I forge it anymore, it will likely crack. So knife making is real finicky in that sense. Let's see here. There we go. I'm gonna trim off.
Like a noodle.
It does.
All you sports fans out here, this is where it's like the first heat, second heat. What heat are you on? That's where this terminology comes from.
Is it really?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Too many irons in the fire. Maybe the young ones have never heard that one. Yeah. Usually, if you have too many irons you're playing with in the fire, the one will burn up. Yeah. You forget about it, type thing.
So really, blacksmithing is just playing with really dense putty, and you do it with tongs.
Yeah. So the metal, when it's melted, or when it's red hot like that, it's got kind of a clay consistency to it?
It does. Steel moves very similar to clay, and blacksmiths will actually practice specific techniques by taking a clay bar and mimicking all the hits gently on the anvil with a clay bar, because the clay moves the same way. I have a brush here because You see all this flaky stuff coming off my anvil. That's from the steel. You heat up steel this much, it oxidizes. So it's a kind of rust, really. Different form of iron oxide. And I just use this is called a butcher block brush. You can use a wire brush just to, whoops, brush it all off. I'm gonna heat that up one more time before I drive it into the stump. And I'm going to waterproof it with a little bit of beeswax. If you put beeswax or any oil on hot steel, then it burns off and it changes. It makes a black coating. That's how cast iron is seasoned. That's how I season this pan. It's just seasoned with beeswax. This is probably hot enough. Yep. You can see it just smokes right off.
So that'll keep it from rusting sitting outdoors.
Yeah, it weatherproofs it a little bit. It's not perfect. If I really just leave it in the rain, it'll eventually rust through, but it's a good first line of protection for it. Yeah, just like that. I'll go ahead and cool it off right now. So knowledge of making really basic tools, like if you got to hang a hammer, you need to make a hook to hang it, or any sort of tool. I find myself making little things like this about as often as I make actual tools like chisels and axes and knives and things of that nature. There we go. Now I can hang my hammer. How are we doing on time? Great, that was only the first 10 minutes. So, for my next trick, I shall make my anvil disappear.
With gunpowder.
For the next thing I'm going to make, I'm going to make a small decorative leaf ring. That's a item I used to make quite a bit. A ring. It's going to be a ring that you wear. It's going to be made a little bit different, and it's going to have a leaf and a vine little decorative element to it. I've made lots of those in the past. Used to be an item I sold. You may have heard the story if you've ever been to the Nauvoo gift shop. They have these little horseshoe nail rings. It's just a horseshoe nail that's wrapped into a circle. The story there is the pioneers moving to Utah. People wanted to get married, but they didn't have wedding rings, and so a blacksmith boy decided to take a nail and bend it around and use that as the wedding ring. And it may have some merit to it, it might not. I'm not totally convinced, because any actual blacksmith knows at least 5 ways to make a ring, and it doesn't always require a nail. So here's the way I make a ring. And I show making a ring because it utilizes several different forging techniques. You saw me draw out the end of that steel to a point, and that's a really foundational technique to blacksmithing, drawing out. But there's other techniques like isolating and more aggressive work drawing out that I use the horn of the anvil for. And this just shows how many different shapes, how malleable you can make steel become. It'll be the same process for making spoons like this. And I actually eat with these spoons. You might think it tastes like metal or tastes like rust or something, but no, it's like cast iron. And I season it just like you saw me do with the beeswax. So these spoons are every bit as good for eating, and you can't bend them like you can the chintzy stainless steel spoons that are currently in your drawers. All right. There's a lot to do with knowing the temperature of iron based on the glow. And I use the term iron and steel interchangeably, but I can tell what temperature it is approximately by the color it's glowing. All right, so I just made a nice little stout pyramid right there. I'm gonna flatten this stock a little bit because it's a little too thick. All right, now I'm isolating that little pyramid at the end. You'll see by hitting it over the edge of the anvil. just like that. So I have this weird little shape now, little candle flame looking shape, and that will become a nice decorative leaf in a couple more heats. If anybody has questions, you're welcome to ask, by the way. Coal, straight from the ground. You can also use charcoal in a forge like this. Charcoal burns up faster and it's lighter weight. You sometimes get more sparks with charcoal, but for a long time I couldn't even afford coal, so I made my own charcoal in the backyard and forged everything with that. Where can you find it? Oh, it's forest fires. I've legitimately picked up charcoal from burn areas. I've filled bags of it from national forest areas. I'm using the near edge of the anvil to isolate a little more metal. Let me straighten it out there. Alright, that's cooled down too much. I'm slowly drawing this out. This narrow section in the center here, that's going to become the band of the ring. This is a wrapped ring, so the ends won't totally meet. They'll just kind of overlap and touch, but with the decorative element of a leaf on one end and a curled vine on the other end, it'll look really good. I wish I had a display piece of these rings, but I don't. I will in a minute. It'll be similar to this necklace. This is one of the leaf necklaces I make. I've sold lots of these. One of the items I really love.
Hey, I know a person who has one of those rings.
Oh yeah! Here's the ring I'm making. This is my wife's ring. Here we go.
When you married her, you had a horseshoe man.
Thank you, Heidi. Also worth noting, it's really nice if you have a bar that's long enough that you don't need to use a pair of tongs to hold the metal. This bar is long enough, it's warm in my hand, but not burning. So it's just a little more wieldy when you can forge something at the end of a bar rather than holding a small piece of metal in your tongs. Somebody asked about charcoal earlier. You can use charcoal briquettes if you're in a pinch. Any sort of barbecue charcoal will work in a forge like this. I try to be really rhythmic with my hammer blows because it conserves energy. I'm using the anvil to bounce the hammer back up. If it just absorbed all the impact, it'd be really cumbersome to lift up the hammer after every time. So by being rhythmic with it, I can always have it just bounce right back, and I use way less energy to forge the steel. This is a 3-pound hammer.
Did you make that hammer?
I did not make the hammer. I rehandled it. I have to do that every now and then. My usual hammer, which is this one, also a 3-pound cross peen hammer. I was forging one day and the handle just broke on me. It hit the anvil and just ping, the head went bouncing away. So I was bummed about that because that was about 2 days before I came up here. So I usually use a slightly longer handle on the hammer. There's 2 trade-offs with that. Longer handle means you can get more power. I can really swing on a bigger piece of steel. Like if I was forging this is a lot thicker. I'd really want to have a lot of power with that. Having a longer handle generates more power, but I can be much more precise with a short handle that I choke up on. That's how I can get really precise little taps when I'm working really fine stuff like I'm doing here.
You find it's fairly tiring on your arm?
Not really. You want a good grip on the hammer, and what's better than just squeezing the daylights out of it, which is what fatigues your arm, I put beeswax on it. That's nice and grippy, so I barely have to hold it. In fact, it's mostly 2 fingers that hold it, and my other fingers just stop it. So it's not really that tiring, although you do build up very big Popeye forearms doing this.
It's solid.
Steel's always dropping when I'm working. So same thing, I'm just drawing out the same section. Just getting it as thin as I want. Let me straighten everything out. Stuff gets a little wonky. Once it cools down below a glow, it's a really good heat to straighten everything up. At this temperature, it's about 900 degrees Fahrenheit. When it's glowing a nice cherry red, it's around 1200 degrees Fahrenheit. And when I get really bright orange, it's closer to 2000.
I noticed that between hits, you'll bounce the hammer on the anvil. What's that about?
It's to keep the rhythm going. And the anvil bounces the hammer up. So if I am halfway up and I can give it a little lift by bouncing it, it saves me just a little energy and keeps the rhythm going. So if I'm working a lot, ding, 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 and I need a second to look at the steel, sometimes I'll tap the anvil instead to keep the rhythm and keep the same potential energy. Lots of blacksmiths do it. Everybody questions it. You don't really understand it till you start doing it.
There's a lot of science in this.
Oh, you have to be a metallurgist to be a good blacksmith.
You play the drums too?
I do, actually.
He's very good.
Helps with the rhythm.
So this is all square in cross section. I'm now hitting the peaks to make it round, or to make it octagon. I don't know if that quite makes sense to everybody, but because I've been turning it 90 degrees with each hit, it makes a long skinny rectangle.
Square shaft.
Yeah, it's a square shaft, so I put it up on edge, so it's like a diamond, and then hit those edges, and that turns that square 4 sides into 8 sides. So octagon, and then from there I can just slowly rotate it, make it round.
What is it you're forming?
I'm making a ring.
A ring?
Yep. Lots of people nowadays like using propane forges. I started with a coal forge, and that's just what I like. And it's more versatile. I can make charcoal no matter where I am.
Seth, why do they call it a forge? That's a noun, but you do the verb of forging.
The verb came after the noun. What I'm doing is technically smithing, not forging, not blacksmithing. I am smithing. Smith means to smite.
And you are. Mike. Yep, he is.
Just isolating that metal. This metal's so thin now, it loses its heat very quickly.
Does it also heat up quickly?
Yeah. Loses its heat quickly, but heats up quickly. It melts and it burns like a sparkler. It's cool to see. Whoops. So I'm just making it totally round now. Keep on missing and hitting the actual anvil, and it bounces up on me.
So this is smithing. What is blacksmithing?
That's a distortion of the noun blacksmith. A blacksmith, iron is the black metal. That's what's been referred to throughout history. So a blacksmith is somebody who smites the black metal. All right, so I have the band of the ring forged as thin and as round as I'd like it. I'm now going to work on the leaf. I have that little pyramid bulb at the end. I'm basically just going to flatten that. Yikes, I should have been watching that. I'm just going to flatten the pyramid and it'll make a nice spade shape, and then I'll add some details to the surface of it using a tool called a fuller. So I got that bulb right there. Just going to give it a couple whacks. Then I'm going to use the cross peen because I can draw stuff sideways instead of forward. And use the flat of the hammer to clean it all up. There we go. That's your leaf shape. Everybody sees that? So now I have a nice long stem with a leaf, and I can put some detail work on it. You know, I might use a chisel instead of a fuller. Not that it really makes any difference to people who don't know the difference. I'll show you. Here's a chisel. Chisel has a little knife edge, and you hit one end with the hammer. A fuller, on the other hand, if I can remember where I put it. Is there a little tin can? There it is. Thank you. A fuller is just slightly different in that it's blunt and rounded. You can see that? Not sharp at all. It's like somebody destroyed the surface of a chisel. So rounded surface, that's for just doing specific detail work. And a lot of my stuff here, my decorative elements here, show work of the fuller. Like the horses here, the manes of the horses were done using a fuller. All right, this is a little vise tool. Gonna use that real quick. Yeah, I'm gonna use the chisel instead of the fuller, but that tool just holds that in place for me. Yep.
How hard is it to take the tool to take out?
How is it to take the tool out? How hard is it to take the tool out? Is that what you asked?
Yeah.
You'll see in just a moment. Pretty easy. All right, so I just made the central vein of the leaf. Now I'm making some little secondary veins. This chisel, by the way, is made from an old car spring. I use recycled material whenever I can, because I can usually get it for free. And car springs are a nice hard steel. That's all springs are made of a hard steel. That's what gives them a springing ability instead of just being flattened. One more little vein here.
So what kind of metal is the chisel made of?
Car spring, high carbon steel. All knives are made of a high carbon steel because carbon makes steel harder. Just by tapping on the bottom of that tool, I can remove it. This is made of rebar. I use rebar for a lot of different things because rebar is a medium carbon steel. It's a tough steel that's resilient, but it doesn't hold a good edge because it's not high enough carbon. It's a good sweet spot for things like hammers and things that take impact. All right, here's my leaf with the veins. That looks a lot like a leaf, doesn't it? Yeah. So I'm going to heat that up one more time, and I'm going to use my ball peen hammer, the round end, on this stump here. A tree stump is an amazing tool because you can hammer metal into it and it will put the form of the metal. If you put a flat piece of hot metal on a tree stump and start hammering, it'll make a nice cupped dish. So that's useful for making steel bowls and steel spoons and stuff like that. How am I doing on time? Pretty much out of time. All right. All right, and that's already nice and hot. So I'm going to go over to my anvil here. It's just burning its own form in. Just like that, I dished it up nicely. Brush all the soot off. Now I have nice curvature, so it'll contour to the finger a little better. Use the brush to shiny things up a little. Alright, so now I'm ready to pretty much cut it off, draw the stem to a little more of a taper so I can curl the other end and wrap it. And that's all a pretty quick process. In fact, I can just go ahead, just straightening that out real quick. I'll use the chisel and cut it now, about where I think it needs to be. You can cut most of the way through and then tap the rest of the way through. If my chisel goes all the way through the metal and hits the hard face of the anvil, it'll dull the chisel because they're about the same hardness. Chisels can only cut through things that are softer than themselves. All right, that metal's hot, so I'm just gonna place that right there. Now I have my little ring blank. What's that? Yeah, a blank is a preform. So you'll hear bladesmiths talk about their knife blanks. That just means it's an unfinished knife. It has the silhouette of a knife, but no edge. It's not hardened. It doesn't have the drilled holes for the handle. Gonna switch to these tongs. These tongs are called scrolling tongs. They're really nice for holding really thin pieces like this, as well as for doing little wraps, making little curls, scrolls they're called. All right. Man, let me straighten this out. It's finicky working such small pieces in tongs rather than on the end of the bar. See, it flies out everywhere. The more kinds of tongs you can have, the better things go for you, because ultimately the goal is to have a size of tong for every tool. I tend to just make do with what I got. So I just gave that a nice little taper. I'll heat that up now and add a little bit of a curl. I keep on forgetting I have this new hook here. I'll just keep my hammer right there. All right, that tail is nice and hot. I'm gonna start the curl and then use the hammer to finish it. Lots of people do curls entirely with the tongs. I just really like finishing them off with the hammer. And there's many ways to do this. This is one of over 100 ways to make a ring. And one style of thousands. Whoops. Yeah. All right, now it's ready to wrap. So I need something to wrap it around, so I'll use a bar like this. That's my preform. This has a little flare on the end though, so let me flatten that. Lots of beginner blacksmiths will try to forge by like pushing into the steel. It doesn't do anything. You want it to bounce. I'm not swinging it down, I'm bringing it up and dropping it and just letting the hammer do the work. Got that nice and hot. Basically, just bend it all around. Use the hammer. The leaf is a little too cool right now, so everything bent nicely except the leaf. So I'll do one more heat. Use my scrolling tongs here. That's really starting to take shape as a ring. As that other ring you saw, the leaf was a little smaller on that, but each one comes out a little different. It's nice that it always has that stylistic touch of whatever blacksmith made it. Unlike machined parts, you can't have perfect uniformity with every single thing that you make. But that's not a detriment at all. Archaeologists can only know what civilization made a certain tool sometimes just by the shape of the tool. I get a little warm. It sure is nice in the winter. There we go. I've had my forge in some really hot, miserable places where in front of the forge I've actually taken the temperature and it's over 120 degrees where I'm standing and working just because the fire's there on a 100-degree day. All right, just about there. I'm just gonna brush it off and put a little beeswax on it. That brushing leaves a nice shiny finish. Just like that. Now, better smiths than I could make the same ring in about half the time. But it's also tricky, talking, answering questions, and forging at the same time, so I'll give myself a little grace.
There you go. We're impressed.
Thanks. Just giving it a little more heat, then that beeswax will put a nice shiny black finish on it. All right. Yeah, get this on the camera. Don't breathe that beeswax smoke. It's no worse than coal smoke, I'm sure. Use a bandana here to wipe off the excess. Cool it off. All right. That is a finished ring. I'll keep this on the display table. That's going to be moved back into the hall with all the rest, so you can take a look at all the things that I've made. I have a cooking tripod here. I meant to bring my cast iron pot that I usually hang from that system. But
Show them your the cast iron.
I already did.
Well, those people who weren't here at the beginning.
This is a steel pan. It's just like cast iron except lighter weight and not as brittle and much smoother, much better for cooking with than any modern cast iron pan. This was a flat piece of steel that I formed the pan out of, and then it has a handle that's been riveted on. I forged the handle and forged the rivets.
You made that?
Yeah, and this is all made from scraps as well.
So what did the ring start with? I missed the beginning.
It started with this steel here. This is 3/8 round stock. All right, thank you, everybody.